Thanks so much, Chip. It's really a privilege to be here and to follow such wonderful talks by Mark Lee and by Michael and Jane, and to see so many people here who are committed to these issues and interested, and so many young people, and to see that here at Golden West, this is a set of themes and issues that has real meaning to people. I'm not as erudite or articulate as your previous speakers. I'm a little more rough-edged. And really what I'm going to say is a little more rough-edged, because I'm going to touch on some of the things that Michael and Jane were looking at, which are power issues, power relations between individuals, and tension. And I think these are so relevant to the theme of today, of peace, because as Mark Lee pointed out, these differentials in power, tension among individuals and between groups of individuals exists in the world. The difference between violence and nonviolence, between war and peace, is not to pretend that these things don't exist, but it's how we handle them and how we deal with them. And I think to come to a place where we can deal with them in a fair way, an equitable way, a just way, means really exploring them and understanding where we each come from in terms of these issues and what are we going to do, what action can each one of us take to change things and to bring about justice in these areas. So the first thing is, so I have a lot of questions, but unfortunately I don't have any answers, right? The answers are all of you young people in this room, people my age, you know, things are the way they are because of people my age, right? So we need young people with new ideas and new energy to help come up with answers. So the first question I just want to throw out there is, who here is a strong supporter of human rights? Who's a strong supporter of sustainability? Keep that hand up. You raise the other hand. Who's a strong supporter of sustainability? All right. Who thinks that you can have both of these things in the world? Who thinks that to close that gap and overcome that tension is going to take an enormous amount of effort? I do, right? So that's one of the things I want to explore today. Because as Chip mentioned, I'm very committed to sustainability, but we have to ask ourselves, and this touches on some things that Michael and Jane talked about, isn't the sustainability stuff just the new colonialism? Isn't this a way that we can maintain our lifestyle in the West and institutionalize power relations between wealthy nations and poor nations, between the developed world and the developing world, and maintain that power structure under the guise of doing something good for the globe? Where is the line between benefiting all of humanity and benefiting ourselves? So think about that. So one of the issues, and I was glad to hear Michael bring it up, is population. Because there are a lot of people in the world, right? You know, I'm an anthropologist, so I spent some time studying our evolutionary history and our relationship with the other primates. And humans are really a successful animal in the sense of reproduction, right? We're very different from the other apes in that we have multiple dependents, we have short birth spacing, we have care by other people besides the mother, so there's alloparenting. And this is the reason why, one of the big reasons why, there's 6 billion of us, and as Jane pointed out, our great ape relatives may very well go extinct in your lifetime, right? Because humans are very, very good at extracting resources from the environment and converting them into reproduction. And our ancestors were very good at this. When the humans diverged from the other apes, this is something that we gained a big advantage in. And now we have a lot of issues because of this. So Joel Cohen asked a few years ago the question, how many people can the Earth support? And he realized, of course, that, and this is a quote from him on your right, that the question is incomplete. What kind of life? A life like this that we're living here in Orange County? Not as many as we've got. All 6 billion people in the world can't live like this with our current technology and the way that we're using resources and the rate at which we're consuming things. And this, of course, causes a lot of problems, which is why I'm sure some of you have spent time defending our national interests in Iraq and Afghanistan, and why we're involved in Libya and things like this. And not only that, why there was debate. Should we support people trying to institute democratic change in their countries? Is that in our national interests? Or would we rather deal with dictators who are going to assure a supply of oil? Right? So these issues are fundamental to what happens in the world. So we see here 3 projections, right? We're in the blue line somewhere there, where population growth is increasing pretty rapidly. So maybe it's going to keep increasing like that for a long time, and then there'd be a real lot of people in the world. Maybe it's going to turn over in a few years, the population starts to decrease. But that in itself is not, I think, the most important question. Because the number of people in the world is a misleading figure. Really, we're talking about populations of people in the plural. There are all kinds of human populations. There are people living very different lifestyles. From an ecological perspective, they're in different environments and different ecologies. Their use of resources is very different. How they acquire resources from the environment is very different. How they convert those resources into other kinds of activities is very different. And so we can't just look at population, we have to look at the total picture, including consumption. And we can call this ecological footprint, environmental pressure. In some ways, for those of you who've been in ecology classes, it's related to the idea of carrying capacity. And this is really about the total amount of resources used, or the idea that it's the population times the consumption, or the per capita consumption. So on the right, there's a map of global ecological footprint. And so you can see Africa, right there, looks very tiny, although there's 1 billion people in Africa, 1/6 of the world's population. But it's a little tiny place in this big map in the United States, which has, maybe I need to ask a math major what percent, what's it, is it 5% of the world's population, I think. It's huge, right? It's it's almost as big as all of Asia. It's many times bigger than Africa. Why? Well, when we look at ecological footprint, when we look at the amount of resources that are consumed and used, we, 5% of the population, but consume a quarter of the world's resources, right? So per capita consumption varies really widely. So when we talk about population being a problem, is the problem of population these people over here, who, might I point out, we have a lot of power over, is it these people right here who we also have some power over, because of course our military spending is equal to the military spending of every other country on earth combined. Are the problem these people over here, or is the population problem the people over here? Because your ecological footprint, as just on average, because you could say, oh, you compost, you do this, you do that, etc. But, if we're going to talk about groups of people, well, then you get to pay the cost of being a member of our group in the United States. And your ecological footprint is about, and no, that isn't my foot going through the earth, people who are saying. It's about 13 times that of the average African. Right? So there's a huge difference here. So we talk about population problem. If we view it as a global problem, well, you're equal to 13 Africans. So an African person can have 26 children and they have the same impact on global resources that the average American with 2 children does. So when we talk about fertility and population, we're not talking, it's not the same thing as the cost in terms of ecological footprint. Now, family planning programs. What are they really?